Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. And so today, again, we move through the book of Genesis, a really powerful, beautiful book that many of us grew up with, right? Many of us, we read these stories. We saw them on the felt board, right? Or Veggie Tales. We've seen these stories. We've heard these stories. Sometimes out of order. Sometimes, you've got a cucumber instead of Noah, whatever. We've heard the stories. Many of us are very familiar with them. But I don't think often we went verse by verse and we actually asked deeper questions, context, metaphor. I think when we don't do that, we miss out on some things. And so in this study, we go deeper. We go deeper. And that's what we do here at Ethos. We go deeper. We dig, we dig, we dig. We ask lots of questions and we allow the context and the culture to inform us first, and then we apply it later. So again, please consider subscribing, share these videos with others. If you want to continue to financially support what we do, the links are there below. Continue working with us, sharing these messages. We believe the Bible has so much beauty, so much meaning, still for today. And so please consider sharing, viewing, helping support what we do. So again, Genesis, we're in the book of Genesis. And again, to recap, I think it's so important that we continue to remind ourselves when the book is compiled. Because again, the book is really a compilation of a lot of different stories, metaphors, all of it. And it happens right after the Israelites are taken captive by the Babylonian Empire, a huge empire, right? Again, their temple's destroyed. They're marched hundreds of miles on foot. They get there, and like all the other empires that Babylon had taken on, right? They had consumed all the others. Everyone else is saying, man, your God destroyed ours, we'll take yours, right? We call this assimilation. And so Israel, again, very, very unlike all the other tribes, they said, you know what, we think our tribe, our culture is worth preserving. And so they choose not to assimilate, not to take on Babylonian stories, their culture, their statutes. Instead, they attempt to hold on to what they have. And so again, 587 BC, this is when it takes place. They get there and Torah is compiled. Again, the first 5 books of what we know as the Old Testament in the Christian culture, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They compile these stories and they call it Torah. Torah is the gift. It's the thing that has kept Jewish people together. The culture, the story, their identity. It's a beautiful, beautiful gift that they felt is from the divine. They compile it all together. That's why, again, when a Jewish rabbi, when he would go to speak, which again, a Jewish rabbi would actually sit on a stool, very similar to what I'm doing, would sit somewhere, right? Whether it's a stool or whatever, but he's sitting a little bit higher, but he's sitting. He's not going back and forth on a stage like you got to. He's not doing any of that. He's not asking the praise and worship leader to do certain things, not turning on the fog machine, none of that. All this it was very simple. The rabbi would pull out Torah, the scroll, and children would gather because just to be close to Torah was considered a blessing. And they would gather around as the rabbi, the Jewish spiritual leader of the community. He would begin expanding on Torah. And sometimes it would only be like 1 or 2 verses. And he would take an hour-ish and just explain the beauty and the context and the richness verse by verse, word by word. And so this is what it was for them. It was a huge blessing. Again, poetry, mythology, prophetic musings, all of it compiled together. It was not written as history. It was written as all of these stories, heroic things, all of it put together, the traditions, all of it compiled, not to keep perfect history, but again, to make them understand our identity, our way of living is worth preserving. And so here are the oral traditions we want to hold on to. They're there to remind us not to assimilate. And so as always, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized through its tellings. So every time we get to a story, every time we get to some kind of metaphor, bigger story, whatever it is, remember these people, these stories are there to remind Israel this is what happens when you move away from wisdom. And so all of it has a connection to Israel, what not to do and what to do. So today we're in chapter 6 of Genesis. We've been moving, right? But it's taken us a little while, 3 months or so. But it's worth it, right? It's so worth it to do. So chapter 6 begins. And in chapter 6, what you have here is you have an individual that comes into the picture. Many of you remember him. He's the art guy, right? His name is Noah. Noah. And remember, every name has a purpose for it, right? The story is going to connect with the meaning of the name. Yeah, because again, it's not that some guy was born Noah and he actually lived exactly like his name was. No. Missing the point. The story is told for a specific reason, and the name is given to continue the story. You get the difference. Yeah, beautiful. And so Noah, the word here, it's a nuku, it means to rest or repose. And so any Jewish person knows this word because what it means is essentially what they do every week. Friday night, Friday sundown until sunset Saturday. What they do is they do this. They repose, they sit back, they rest a bit. It's actually considered a reset. Yeah, you actually get to reset and prepare for the next week. And so the word Noah here, basically, after all the violence, all the chaos of your week, right? You need to hit reset. And when you hit reset, think about your computer. You hit the reset button and there's a minute of pause. There's a minute of nothingness, right? There's a minute where everything just shuts down. And that's, again, what happens when the chaos and the violence and all of this is happening. The Bible tells us over and over again, this Jewish compilation of beautiful wisdom stories, it says that after all the chaos, there is a season of, right? There's a season where everything is just powered down. It shuts down before the new thing, the new idea, the divine steps in and begins creating order in life again. But there needs to be a shutdown. There needs to be a repose. There needs to be a rest. And so, of course, the individual of Noah, right, steps into the story, right? The story needs a reset. The story needs a Noah. Come on. Yes. Think about your own week for a minute. How often do you need a nuku? Right? How often in your week do you need a reset? I think people, even if you're not practicing like this literal Sabbath idea, it is so beautiful to consider. Taking time to reset, repose, rest is so important because you can't step away from the chaos unless you've powered down. Only after the power down can you start back up again. If you just keep going and going and going, you will, in computer terms, crash. Yeah, it makes sense, right? Yeah, you crash. It's painful. But if you're resetting, you're stopping, you're resting, very different story. And so this is the story. It starts with Noah right here. So chapter 5, verse 1 and 2 says this, "And it came to pass when man commenced to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the nobles saw the daughters of man when they were beautifying themselves. And they took for themselves wives from whomever they chose." Now, for many people, when they read this, they don't read too deep into it. It's oftentimes a verse that just kind of gets skipped over, verses 1 and 2. But here's something people will miss. Because again, remember, Israel is kind of countering the story of Babylon. This huge nation that essentially just takes, right? Conquers, ruins, totally just defeats other countries, other empires. They take what they want and they leave devastation. And so understand this. This word here, the word here for take, they took for themselves. It actually means to insolently, couldn't say the word there, take without consideration. Think about that word there. This is what empires do. Empires, they take. They don't consider others. They don't consider the pain, the brokenness that they leave in the wake of their need for more, right? More power, more resources. They just take. And it's the act of telling the story where Israel's almost like jabbing Babylon. It's saying, you know what? the chaos, the brokenness that we need the reset from, it happens when empires act beastly, right? If I'm going to borrow from the ideas of Revelation, when they act beastly, when they take without consideration, chaos is basically experienced. Brokenness, pain. This is what empires do, right? Because empires, the problem with empires is they need more and more and more. And once you get more, well, that's not enough. I need more. And the question, of course, is, will there ever be enough? Will you ever have enough? Will you ever be satisfied? And the answer is no, right? You can never have enough. You're obsessed with more, more, more. And so the question, of course, is, are you going to let wisdom guide you or knowledge? Are you just going to continue consuming knowledge without wisdom? Well, if you do, you're headed toward brokenness. You're headed toward ruin. There is a flood coming. Yeah, what an interesting message for Israel, who's living in the middle of Babylon, right? Whose people are beginning to wonder, maybe we take on the characteristics of Babylon, right? And the warning here is no. Empires like Babylon, who need more and more, that just take and consume without the consideration of others, their time is short. There is a flood in the future, in the very near future. It goes on, chapter 5, verse 3. And the Lord said, let my spirit not quarrel forever concerning man, because he is also flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. Now, growing up, I heard that, again, they took the numbers, the age of man very seriously, very literally, right? When we looked at that big list of names, again, you miss the point entirely. When we begin taking these numbers all literally, well, Adam lived to be 980, and so this person. No, not the point. Again, the idea here is so much bigger. Now, 120, 80, 40, 30, these numbers all had rich meaning for a Jewish person reading it. For us, we just see like ages. Oh yeah, age is really important to us. For Hebrew people, age had symbolic value, but it wasn't like, oh, he's over the hill or whatever. Here's what it meant for them. And you can just look at the slide. Life is numbered. And so when you became a man, it was at 30. Think about this. At 12, you were expected to know Torah. And at 12, you either followed dad's trade or you followed the yoke of a rabbi. Those were your choices. So at 12, huge moment there. So 12, there's some interesting connections, right? 12 tribes, all these things. 12 is a really interesting symbolic number for them. 30 is another really interesting moment for them. 30 is where I'm an adult, right? I'm a grown man, woman. 30 is a big number. Another big number is 80. When you reach the age of 80, you basically have lived a life of a full life, right? You've lived to be 80. That's a really respectable age. People would celebrate that you got to 80. Now, if you live to 120, right? And again, it wasn't always literal. You could be 70 and they would consider you 120. Because 120, the phrase here, the number, what it meant was you have experienced life to its fullest. You are the mentor, you are the guide, you are the sage, right? You are the rabbi that has experienced wisdom and you are sharing it with others. When you are 120, you have lived the life and you can now share it with others. Yeah? Okay. So again, understand 120 has this really interesting connection there. When man is living to that number, they're beginning to experience all these things. However, there's also chaos when an empire is involved, when there's empire and destruction. So there's an interesting balance, right? Israel, wisdom, life, is in the midst of Babylon, which is chaos. This is good, right? Yeah, okay, good. So here we go. Then comes in this interesting phrase that I have seen countless YouTube videos speculating what this is. The Apocrypha, read through that. There's so many different ideas about what this group of angels, people, the Nephilim, right? So I want to talk about that for a minute because that's what's next in verse 4. So I'll read it to you. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Again, it sounds weird, right? The Nephilim. Who are the Nephilim? So Also afterward, when the sons of the nobles would come to the daughters of man, they would bear for them. They are the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So notice this, like we have some. Were they men? Were they fallen angels? Where do we get the idea of fallen angels? Who are the Nephilim? Are they giants? Right? We've heard many different ideas about this group of Nephilim. Whatever. So here's some ideas. Because again, interestingly enough, Jewish people, depending on the era, had different interpretations. Now, the idea that they were angels, this was actually a medieval idea. So during the medieval era, where there were some really amazing, interesting rabbis, Rabbi Rashi, one of the most famous, who does these interesting, amazing connections to Torah, has written Chumash. Rashi was one of those individuals who would say the Nephilim were these fallen angels. And so they took it in a kind of a literal sense here. And so here's one idea. One of them, he says, one of the rabbis said this, Rashi, the Nephilim were on earth at that time. These creatures had fallen from heaven in disgrace and had in turn caused people on earth to fall from their spiritual level to a spirituality still lower level. So basically these angels, fallen angels, they were kind of pushed down onto the earth, and they continued to find ways to degrade man. So that was one of the interpretations that you would find in Judaism. Because again, I'm not really all that interested in what Constantine and others said about it. I'd rather know the people who wrote it, what's the tradition that they have, right? Because that's interesting. That's scholarly. Another idea was this. Rabbi Joseph, he says this, and again, this is just pre-medieval era. So this is what he says. Nephilim were human beings who, due to their imposing stature, made everyone fall down before them in a state of fear. He even points out the word Nephilim has a meaning of great giants. This is more of like the Greek concepts later on that you'll find. The idea here is that they were great giants, great men, right? And so these, like the Philistines and all that, that's what they would be. They were these huge giants, like literal giants on earth. And so two very, very literal interpretations, and whichever you choose, I guess choose your own adventure here, right? There's a lot of different meanings you can find. The more symbolic one that you'll find kind of has a deeper, older tradition for the Hebrews was this one. And so I'll read this one as well to you. This one came from Rabbi Samuel. He says, the Hebrew root of Nephil, it means to fall. Right, so the fallen angel concept still kind of has connection there, could fit. This is, to him, he says, it is far less a literal group of men and much more a metaphor of the Leviathan empires that rule the earth, creating chaos and ruin in their wake. So three different ideas. I personally gravitate toward this one because, again, I see so much symbolism here. So much connection. Here's one group. Here's Israel, and then here is the Nephilim, the Leviathan empires, the groups that take these small tribes, they consume them like demons, right? They consume them like lions. They take, and then of course, what do? They lower the ethics, the morality, all of that. They bring man to a base, bestial kind of character. And so again, that was the idea, the symbolic idea of Nephilim. And maybe it's all of the above, I don't know. But again, it's kind of a mystery because there's so many different ideas connected to it. But I would say for our reading today, bringing up the idea of beastly empire, right? Empires that consume. This is really their reaction to Babylon. And I would argue it makes a lot of sense, right? Babylon would not be happy hearing you are a beastly empire that continues to create chaos and ruin in the world. Yeah, you could see it that way, right? So again, choose your own adventure. Interesting though. All right, so verse 5, it goes on. And the Lord saw that the evil of man was great on the earth, right? We're beginning to see now more and more. They're adopting these teachings, these ideas of empire, Nephilim. They're adopting these things, right? And every imagination of his heart was only evil at that time. Yeah, and again, Probably more metaphor than literal, right? Not every man, right? Everyone is, well, again, consider this. This is more a deeper metaphor. In the middle of chaos, brokenness, we need the repose, right? And before the repose, crap happens, right? And so again, the idea here with empire, the powers of chaos, they oppress, they remove human rights, they stand over, they silence others. That's what it does. And so it gets worse and worse. When empires take control, degeneration, degeneration, degeneration. Yeah. So we see it. And so it says this now, and the Lord regretted that he had made man upon the earth, and he began to be grieved in his heart. Now, is this God as like the deistic God who says like, all right, I made my ants. I'm watching them play. Ugh, I'm not really loving this. I think I'm just going to squash them out. Right? I'm tired. They bit me. One of them bit me. I'm going to squash them. Is this the idea here? No. This is not actually how the Hebrews viewed it. That would have been very contrary to their own teachings. Here's the deeper idea here. Don't take this super literally. Understand the deeper idea here. God, again, hovers over the chaos, right? Hovers over the chaos. This is their story. And so from this tiny Jewish community, they've lost everything because, again, of the enormous empire that's robbed them of it all. This has happened to them, right? And now they're waiting for this like deeper picture again of like how to live fully. What do we do in the middle of the chaos? The story is God will hover over it. He is grieved. He sees the brokenness. This God is about to hover and breathe over the brokenness, over the pain, all the chaos. This is the point. Not that this God pulls back and is like, I regret ever having you as a kid. No. Like that's weird, right? It's taken a metaphor too far. So again, that's the deeper idea here. There's less and less time, right? Something's going to happen soon. I regret seeing that there's brokenness, there's pain. I'm about to hover over the waters. That's the idea. And so again, in verse 7, it goes on. And the Lord said, I will blot out man. Again, really? Like this, we're going to do this literally. I created from upon the face of the earth, from man to cattle to creeping thing to the fowl of the heavens, for I regret that I made them. And we're going to delve into more of this next week about the literalism, symbolism of it. But let me just like scratch the surface a little bit with this one. First off, a God that would literally wipe out, blot out man because he's angry at them is not a God worth worshiping. Let's just start there from the get-go. Secondly, not to be taken literally, right? This is metaphor for something deeper. The pain, the brokenness, the empire has come in, created all this brokenness. We need a repose. We need our divine God to hover over the waters and breathe again before we can start over. Yeah, okay, so you get that. And in the midst of hovering over, it creates this beautiful safe space, the space where we reconsider, we take time, we rest. We'll get to that next week. But chaos, after chaos, there is recreation, right? After chaos, that is the moment. That's the time where things begin again. And so not literally is going to wipe out, blot out all of that, but there's going to be a time of repose. But before it does, there's going to be chaos, right? But after the chaos, the reminder here, the promise right from the get-go is we're going to see recreation again. Mankind is the one flooding the world with pain and brokenness, right? Not God, right? Not the divine. Mankind is the one that brings the brokenness, the pain. It's the Babylonian empires, right? It's the beastly empires. That's what blots the world out with pain and brokenness, oppression, right? We bring so much goodness, but we can also bring a whole lot of bad. That's the idea here. Man is choosing, right? In this moment, Babylonian empires, beastly empires, they're choosing to bring the world pain, brokenness. That is not the divine thing. That's not this God coming down doing this. No, that's man, right? That's man. That's man doing it. And so the response from the divine is, we're about to take a repose. We're about to breathe. And when we do, and again, I love this picture. For a forest to grow, to be real, fruitful, multiply, for a forest to be healthy, there needs to be fire, right? The only way that these seeds can grow is if they are burned, and then they can open. And once they open, they grow. A forest that isn't allowed to burn essentially becomes just a tinderbox ready to explode. And then it just is devastation. Let a fire burn naturally. Let the thing take chaos and happen. And what you have is new growth, new beautiful life emerges. And so chaos will happen. This empire will fall. That empire is going to fall. The old systems will die, and that's natural. But out of the ashes comes new life. And this is the promise for Israel at this moment. From the brokenness, from the pain, our God will hover over the waters again. It's going to remind us that through the brokenness, through the pain, through the chaotic week that you have had this week, there's going to be new life again. I want you to sit back, relax, repose. Noah, right? It's here. Repose is coming. So, what do we do with this? I thought about this one for a while. There's a lot of lessons in the story, and we'll go through many. But one of them I thought, let's talk about ways to remain centered, calm, when there's life's chaos is taking place. I have experienced so much chaos in the last couple of weeks. And so have you. We have an election coming up pretty soon, right? In the next week. There's so much chaos, so much craziness. How do we remain calm in the middle of the chaos? Well, number one is this. I'm learning to visualize. I'm learning to calm my mind down. I'm learning to begin envisioning positive outcomes, no matter what, right? Envisioning the positive to happen, thinking about you know what? That's worst case scenario. That came pretty easy to me. What's best case scenario, right? Let me spend some energy and time thinking about best case scenarios. What's the very best that could come out of this? I'm going to spend my energy imagining that, putting my energy there, because really, it doesn't matter. If I think worst case scenario, I'm putting just as much energy to that as I could into this. Why not? Even if this doesn't happen, the good doesn't happen fully, at least I'm living in that space rather than worst case scenario, right? Visualize the best, and oftentimes the best happens. Yeah, have a positive outlook. It really does help in the midst of chaos. Another thing I'm learning is retrain the brain. For many of us, I think negativity just happens, right? We have trained ourselves to, again, think worst case scenarios so often. So I think by practicing this positivity, by purposely saying, you know what, right now, I'm going to purposely practice saying positive things, thinking positive things, watching positive YouTube videos in the morning, right? There's so many. I'm going to do those things. I'm going to put Facebook down for a little bit, right? I'm going to take time to consider the very best. I'm going to practice it in everything I do. And when you do, that positivity seems to follow, doesn't it? Yeah. Here's another one. Develop faith that things will turn out okay. Have a deep faith in this. It's going to work out. Again, I want you to consider your life, right? How many times were you sure that things are they're just not going to get better? It's just going to be terrible. I'm not going to have toilet paper, whatever it is. You're freaking out, right? You went to the worst case scenario. You did that thing. But here's the thing. If you consider your journey again, those moments where you were freaking out, those moments where you thought it could never get any better, it's going to just be bad. If you remember again, you found a way back up, right? Things did turn around. Your journey speaks to that over and over again. You're still here, right? That is beautiful in itself. You got through the thing. Yeah, it didn't kill you. You made it through. And so remember that. Your story is a reminder that things are going to turn out okay. They're going to turn around. Just hold on a little bit longer, because that's it. Life is an ebb and a flow. It's an ebb and a flow. Next one is this. Keep your eyes and heart focused on how you can add value to the world each day. I think this one's really beautiful. Consider different ways after you've got the positivity, in the middle of all the chaos. What can you do to share that now with other people? Sharing it with other people, it basically helps you live even more fully in it. Again, it's like anything. When you learn how to do something, Beautiful. But teach someone how to do that thing, and before you know it, you become an expert in the thing. Yeah. People oftentimes talk about teachers this way, right? A teacher does this. They learn this something new, and then once they learn how to share it, the thing takes on whole new value, right? You've actually learned how to live it, and you can share it with others. You become positivity. And then lastly, remember that there are still, again, there's still different things to appreciate. It's always going to be there in front of you. There's so much there to view. Here's a verse I want to end with. Proverbs 17:22. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Yeah, a cheerful spirit, someone that is not deterred. And I'm not talking about the fake, right? Like, oh, it's going to be okay. You don't mean it. What I mean is, even in the midst of the chaos and the brokenness, you purposely choose, I am going to choose the positive. I'm going to believe that something good is coming. I believe that there is an ebb and there's a flow to life. And maybe I'm right here right now. But at some point, I'm going to be back up here. I'm going to believe it. I'm going to trust it. I'm not going to get stuck down here. Even though here sometimes is okay too. It's all part of life. But I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to allow my heart to be positive fully. And when we do that, the Proverbs, the wisdom writers say it's like medicine to our souls. It's good for the whole body, the mind, the spirit, all of it. It's good for the soul. And so I want to leave you with that interesting piece of wisdom there. It's like good medicine, learning to live that fully. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, I think Genesis is so good, so much beauty here. We touched on a lot today. And so, as always, please consider partnering with us, ethos-church.org. Please go there, give that tax-deductible donation, partner with us as we continue sharing these messages with the world. And secondly, Ethos Living Rooms. What we do here with this, again, we share these awesome studies together in live discussions online twice a month. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, please consider email me, tonywerfel@gmail.com. If you're not someone that loves to interact with others, you're a little bit more of a wallflower, that's okay too. You can sit, listen, and we will respect you in that way too. But we have had so many awesome discussions. And lastly, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, that little bell as well. And we'd love to continue partnering with you, walking with you through so much of the beauty that is the Bible. Everyone, take care. We'll see you next week. Bye.